Consume cannabis in your region. This production is for adults only.
Have you seen the Slash?
Made by users for users.
Engineered for flavor.
One of the coolest features around.
A built-in loading tool.
Learn more at www.stonesmiths.ca. This is the Business of Cannabis, a joint venture between the Green Generation Co. and the Cannabis 101 podcast. Bringing you the latest bud, biz, buzz.
As usual, Malka Labell joining me from the Green Generation Co. You can find her online at greengencompany.com and on Twitter at greengenco1. Malka, great to see you again. I have overcome my technical difficulties from last week, and I think, knock on wood, that we have things going. How was your week? My week was just crazy with technical stuff in a bad way. You had a great week when it comes to the use of technology. Tell me about the event that you had.
Yeah, the virtual holiday shindig. I don't think it could have gone any better. We had a great showing of customers and clients, as well as like vendors, people that I'm working with in all ways, including the the dragons, what are they called? The guys that did the ugly sweater pitch to the Dragon's Den. 2 out of the 3 founders of that company were on our event, spewing their investor goodness. They've kind of turned into sort of angel investors themselves now after been through the Dragon's Den a couple times. So it was a ton of fun, just with great people showing up and coming up with some really creative ways to showcase their company and their product. Some great ugly sweaters, like even the ugly sweater, kings were saying, I haven't seen that one. There was a really good one. So I have my Twitter and my Instagram will have some examples of that and some of the show and tell from that event. So stay tuned to my at GreenGenCo and at GreenGenCo1 on Twitter to see more of that. It was definitely a lot of fun. I'm real sorry we missed you, Dean.
Yeah, well, I would love to have been there, but technology was continually beating me down like Mike Tyson to many of his opponents in the ring. So it was not a good week technology-wise, but I wish I could have been there. I look forward to more events because I think that is a really, really great way for people to network and showcase what they're doing. So I really think you're on the right path. So I look forward to many more events like that. And I look forward to our lead topic on the business of cannabis, because your kind of statement is that the rest of the world simply doesn't care about Canada's version of legal cannabis. Tell us what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty bold statement. Actually, what I really meant to say was Americans don't really care. I want to rephrase that. So here's where this came from. My lovely 80-year-old aunt who lives in Seattle, Washington, she reached out to me on Facebook. We sort of keep in touch over Facebook and what everyone is doing. And it was the weekend last week when the Tilray-Aphria merger came out. So unprompted, she sent me a message over Facebook asking me if I sold my Tilray stock when it's at $300. And I'm like, whoa, Pauline, you're up on the stocks for cannabis. So we chatted a bit about that, and what she said, she's like, yeah, they're doing fine. They're in Seattle still, and we'll probably go to Florida like they do every year. They sort of spend half the time in the warm climate and half the time in Washington. But they have an abundance of stores, she says, and store sales in Seattle are through the roof. She says that cannabis is very popular, especially the pain gels and the creams, so a lot of topicals. And, of course, marijuana is used for health reasons. That's a big seller. And medicinal cannabis is a huge business in the States. And it doesn't have to be from a doctor. So she said she's really glad that it's legal in their state. And so I did a little digging on what is the state of cannabis in a legal state like Washington State. and it has been legal there since 2014. And I was able to find quite a bit of really solid information on the state's websites, including about 180 stores. It was like a PDF list with links to every of the 180 stores, names, locations, and whether or not they have a medical endorsement person on staff. So for them, the classification of medical cannabis means that there's someone on site that can issue you a medical marijuana certificate. And it has the hours of that person, or, you got to call ahead to find out what they are during COVID. But basically someone that has a bit more experience. I'm not exactly sure what their qualifications are. I couldn't get to that on my search so far, but I definitely want to find out. And this person would be able to issue someone walking into the store a patient authorization number and to allow them to be able to possess cannabis at the same kind of limits that we would have here. And it is also legal recreationally. So there's just as many stores on the rec side, I think, if not more, than there are on the medicinal side. So I thought that was really interesting.
And is that much different from experiences that people have here in Canada as far as, the accessibility? I know we have talked in the past about there are some companies that are saying, hey, we need to streamline this and we need to make this much easier. So, compare that to the Canadian side.
So the Canadian side is painfully antiquated compared to the US side. So in Canada, if you wanted a medical prescription, you would have to hunt down a medical doctor. So that's an MD at the very least, if not more, that would write you a prescription for just an amount of cannabis. So there are cannabis clinics, and there's a few. I mean, there's some of the bigger ones have now a lot of telehealth options, and Shoppers Drug Mart is getting into that game. We've talked about that before. But basically someone would have to literally see you either in person or telehealth, assess your medical need, and then you can't go to a store. You literally cannot go to the store if you have a medical cannabis certificate. You have to, they don't give you a certificate. You have to go online to one of the preferred or one of the medical cannabis LPs, which are the licensed producers that are allowed to sell you use medical grade cannabis in air quotes, because it's the same thing you buy at the retail rec stores in Canada, maybe with a bit of a different name. But, and then you have to have it mailed to you. So the entire process in Canada is painfully old and dated. It doesn't even make sense. Whereas in the US, these lovely ladies in the corner, in the prime of their life, looking and trying topicals. They go in the store, they rub it on their skin. Oh, that makes my arthritis feel better. I'll buy 10. I'll buy one for everyone at the bridge table because we're all suffering. So that doesn't exist in Canada. You can buy recreational products, but you can't go into a store and have a medical consultation in a recreational store. There's a lot of things that you would want to know, particularly as a new user or as a person that takes other medication. The people in a recreation store, in a retail store in Canada, cannot give you any information about that. They have to send you to a third-party medical person that can then authenticate or authorize you to take cannabis in conjunction or whatever your situation is. It's ridiculous here. I get why they set it up that way, but it needs to be fully, ripped up and gone away with, the medical side versus the rec side. It should be the same thing. And I like the concept of being able to go into a store and talk to a person and try it, try it on. If it's a topical, right? What's the deal, right? So
that's the big difference, right? Is that, when pre-legalization, when I went into a dispensary, the cannabis was right there. You actually looked at it. It's a much different world, pre and post legalization. And then Canada compared to the U.S. and friends of mine, Ian Scott of Plant Life told me when he was down in Vegas for a convention one time, they were selling CBD at a mall kiosk. So it really is much different, and I think a melding of both would be good. I don't think you just want to let anybody do it, as we've talked about in the past, as far as what's in it. But there's got to be there's got to be a happy medium between the two situations that is going to be effective, most importantly, for the patient. That's who this is all about in the end. It's about the patient.
Yeah, and what Pauline, when my aunt was saying, she's like, there's no stigma against it in the US. It's like, it's just another product you would get for pain or for whatever. Like, there's no, like, if you call it CBD or marijuana, everyone's interested. There's no negative around it. So it's just, I find it hilarious, and I'm a little jealous. But at the same time, it allowed me to do some research in that space. I'm as a consultant, I could do business in Seattle under they have a Canadian information section, and there's a lot of people that live in Seattle that are from Canada. So I actually stuck my name in there as potentially being a vendor on one of these sites just for information about what's happening in Canada, should they care. Mm-hmm. But the point is, they don't need to. Yeah, that's the point of the segment.
Yeah, they're doing a fine job on its own for sure. And when you talk about states that are legal right now and the push that got them there, I think as we move into Changemakers, we look at a magazine that debuted in the 70s, much earlier than legalization. This magazine has been around longer than I have been, and I think I'm old. So we're talking about High Times, and this is kind of like an iconic cannabis. My guest last week, Colin, the co-owner of Shell Shock Head Shops here in Edmonton, they have some of the classic covers that you can go in and buy in a nice frame and stuff like that. So tell us a little bit about High Times for maybe those people that aren't familiar with it if they're new to the cannabis space.
Yeah, I love it. This is sort of like a relic of history, yet very current at the same time. I don't know what that's called, but transcends all time and space. So yeah, I did a little research on this too, because I have been a fan of this magazine for a long time, long before legalization. I just think the photos and imagery is fantastic. It was first published in 1974. This year marks their 46-year anniversary. And the cool part about this, you can buy this at Circle K or whatever, Max or whatever it's called. You can buy this anywhere. There's no age gating required for buying literature like this, which I think is actually very funny. The magazine was started actually as a parody on Playboy. So if you look at some of the official information, it was first published as a parody where like marijuana replaced the word sex. And so they, like the centerfolds, remember the Playboys? I'm sure if you're a guy, you know what a Playboy centerfold is. Well, there's the centerfold in the High Times magazine. It is a beautiful, glossy,
sexy.
Like, take that out and put that up on your wall. I know a few people that would drool over that photo. So, I mean, that's the classics, right? Like, you don't even see this anymore. And they've done a great job at preserving their image, their legality. They've had a large, I would say, a cult alternative following since day one. Mm-hmm. They've had a lot of celebrities graze their cover. Everything from, we've got Snoop Dogg, we've got John Lennon, who else did I mention? JFK, some very important people in history have grazed the cover of High Times. The funny thing that I thought was funny, the whole world of legalized cannabis was supposedly this amazing thing for the stock market. Well, they were planning on doing an IPO. And I remember this sort of triggered a memory of I remember when Spirit Leaf, Inner Spirit Holdings was talking about those. So prior to legalization, Inner Spirit Holdings had bought in. There was like a friends and family round or initial investment round with the High Times Holding Corp in 2018, and they were planning to, this was initial raise money to then go on the public markets, which was a great idea at the time before legalization. But unfortunately, as per quoted the owner or the president CEO, in 2020, they abandoned their plans to list on the NASDAQ, citing market volatility around cannabis stocks as the reason, with intention to maybe delay that a little bit and maybe due to a smaller stock exchange like the OTC or the CSE. But there has been a lot of bumps in the road with the whole industry. But I would say this is like a staple. This is a strong voice for advocacy of the legal cannabis space or wherever you are. It's about the plant, not about the politics. And they have done a great job building a following. They have these cannabis cups. I think we're in year 32 of the cannabis cups. And now they do it regionally. So they have, like, I was able to watch a version of just some of they have a whole media side. So you have all the streaming content on through their website. And you can watch the High Times Cups in different jurisdictions. I watched the cups awarded for the Illinois, for the Chicago Cups or the Illinois Cup. And so they have all these different they've basically made a business that doesn't actually involve making cannabis. So the ancillary stuff, kind of like we are, and have been very successful at it, building that branding and building what they do with a massive cult-like following.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
And there's not a lot like them. Like there's, listen, David Wiley, who joins me every week for This Week in Cannabis News from the OZ, he does a really awesome job of covering the regional things that are going on in cannabis, and we touch on some national stories. But there's not a lot of publications out there that kind of have this backstory or this experience or this reach that High Times. Like, yeah, it was a cult following who, now that with legalization and the globalization of cannabis, is no more a cult following. It's like, The Big Lebowski was one time kind of a cult movie, and now it's like one of the most popular movies of all time. And High Times is kind of like they're like the Big Lebowski. They kind of started out in times of trouble where it wasn't very safe to be doing it, and here they are, the standard. I love it. It's a great story.
I would like to say that the High Times is kind of like, I would say, like the Seth Rogen concept in the media world here. So what I mean by that is a lot of people didn't take him seriously as an actor at the beginning because he was kind of parodying himself, right? Like his initial movies were sort of about him being a knucklehead. But, look out where that has turned out. I think High Times, same thing. They sort of played off on this spoof idea that was kind of a joke. And it just attracted a ton of interest. But of all of the brands out there that have to do with cannabis, other than, actually, I can't even say other than, I think this would probably, if I had to put money on the biggest brand value that a brand asset has in the cannabis sector, I would say High Times is number one by far. And that's what everyone's trying to do, is create these iconic brands. Well, you can't make an iconic brand overnight. It takes decades, and that's largely my argument in other segments we've had. But what's cool is these people have done it without selling any weed. Yeah. They promote, they endorse, they talk about it. They are entirely wrapped around in the culture, but have nothing to do with the actual processing, making, procurement, cultivation in any jurisdiction. And even in the magazine, there's ads in here that are entirely about Canadian products, like 100%. They have an entire section. This is the Stash Awards. There's an entire section dedicated to Canadian brands that they're free to talk about because this is a U.S. publication sold in Canada without any age gating. I don't know. It's a bunch of loopholes here. Yep. But the point is, this is not even meant to be taken seriously. There's ads in here that you can't buy from them because of where you live. And it says it on the ad. It says, we will not ship to the US. We're a Netherlands company. We're registered in Canada and, Europe, but we will not ship to the USA. So it's just, if I find it like fascinating, funny, and extremely interesting. And I hope they continue for another, 45, 50 years or more.
Well, that shows their global reach, that, companies who cannot ship to the U.S. will advertise in a U.S.-based publication just to get some kind of brand awareness. And, for people around the world that they are able to ship to, it gives them even more brand awareness. So it shows the reach and the popularity, not just with the listeners, but with the customers, the advertisers, the companies as well. So now, from High Times to Henry Ford, as we go to what it means to be green. And this is a story that I absolutely love. We had Jay, a buddy of mine from Yellowhead Hemp Company, on in our second episode talking about this very thing. And here we are, episode 78. I love this absolute story because it's a story that I don't think is very well known at all.
Yeah, and there's actually been a lot of people that have discredited it. Like they said, like I've actually seen some of the criticism around like who was the real source and author. I mean, it doesn't take much to make a meme, right? But the source of this information was, I think, is fairly relevant. So actually, I found these memes and this information summarized in what's called Now This, which is actually, I found it on the High Times media site, but it's actually in a lot of places. Like you can find Now This is like a big media thing. It's sort of a spin-off they have different categories. There's another one about like, it's more about being like environmentally friendly, and like this whole like junior line with like the whole like young youth movement towards, greening the planet. So the people that made this information and put it into a very nice 2-minute video I'm giving credit this people. But what they're talking about is, 100 and something years old. So the Ford Motor Company and the Model T, which was the first, assembly line vehicle, mass-produced assembly line vehicle by the Ford Motor Company and by any company, they're iconic in their place in history, but they marked the beginning of the second industrial revolution. And what we mean by that, the first one was when they put factories into towns and everyone became a factory worker, and, you owe your soul to the company's stores, that the coal mining and the industrialized revolution. The second industrial revolution was the moving assembly line. So that's what Ford created. And the mass production of automobiles started a demand for gasoline and oil and bitumen and products that really created the oil boom in the US, that created an infrastructure of paved roads and highways and interstates that built the interconnectivity of the United States of America. Entire oil pipelines were built from oil fields to Texas refineries to the eastern US where the population was. And it was the introduction of the mass production of oil products, everything from, car parts or plastics to, petroleum products, obviously. And the modern era of petroleum really began from Henry Ford. But the irony in all this is that Popular Mechanics, which was a popular mechanic magazine, I think that's still around as well. It's probably older than High Times, obviously, if we're talking about Henry Ford. They said that Henry Ford was quoted to say, "Why use up the forests, which were centuries in the making, and the mines, which required ages to lay down, if we can get the equivalent of forest and mineral products in the annual growth of the hemp fields?" So he was a proponent of hemp from day one. He made his first models of the Model T were made out of hemp parts using hemp fibers, and it was supposed to be made on hemp fuel, like a biofuel made almost like an ethanol, kind of like corn or vegetable oil. Ford's first Model T was built to run and constructed out of hemp products, but someone must have convinced him that steel and oil were better products to make cars out of in the early days. So his hemp version of the car never made it to market. Someone early in that year, you could probably pinpoint the year time frame. I wonder where our world would have been if that never happened. If you think about that for a second, if we were to jump in a DeLorean, pun intended on the iconic car that is now dead and buried. Apparently coming back, though, for a short run in 2021. But anyways, the DeLorean from Back to the Future is a symbol of getting around, right? Whether it be a vehicle or not. But what if we were able to jump in one for a second and go back to that, be a fly on the wall of that dinner or that conversation or that boardroom, wherever it occurred, church maybe, where the plant argument was taken away and the let's produce oil and go drill for this stuff was put into play. And what was that conversation like and about? I am extremely interested to know the answer to this. I don't know if it exists, but I definitely think that it's something to ponder, because Henry Ford was clearly well before his time in the clean energy advocacy. He didn't even know what dirty energy was when he was talking about hemp being a clean source and saying that it's better to do that than pull it out of the ground. So he is my example of what it means to be green this week.
Yeah, there are, like, we can pick different moments in time that you'd like to go back and be a part of the conversation. Like, if I could go back and hear the very first bass line for Another One Bites the Dust from Queen, to be in that room the very first time, I would love to be there. There's other great moments, but yeah, could you imagine, Christopher Lloyd picks you up, you go back in time and you convince Henry Ford to go with hemp, what our world might be like today? I can't imagine what it would be like.
It's crazy. Sometimes in this day and age, though, you got to sort of wonder, like, I don't know. I think it's a fun exercise to play with your brain, maybe when you're a little high.
Sure.
it
Yeah.
but for now, it's just something to ponder what it means to be green. Henry Ford had it right, and someone changed his mind.
Well, and hopefully other people change their minds going forward, and we learn from that and say, okay, let's explore this more. Why can't we do it now? We have more technology than we've ever had, so we should be able to do so much more from hemp. So at the very least, let's learn from, maybe not going down that route, 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of electric vehicles. That market is picking up. And with COVID, we're not having to go as far anymore, and the whole work from home thing, now be the time to turn back that clock. We'll
Indeed.
see.
Yeah. Malka, this has been a lot of fun. Happy holidays to you and yours. And this is the last show we have until 2021. So we know it's been a tough 2020. I look forward to next year being much better. But happy holidays to you and yours.